Hey, what's happening, buddy? This is Hayden Adams with A Designer Who Codes. I want to focus on the accordion today within Bootstrap 5. Now, by default, the accordions look decent, but I think they can look so much better. So in this example, we're going to show you how you build the accordion, and then we'll take it a step further and give it some pizzazz. I'm going to build it where we have a dark background behind each bar and dark enough where the text can be reversed out and the arrow is reversed out as well, really saying, I'm clicking on 3, 2, or 1. And with that, let's get started. All right, so I'm using the Bootstrap default template for this project. The only thing I did different was I added a custom CSS file. If I go into the custom CSS, I want to build a single column at 750 pixels across for maximum legibility. So I'm going to say single call, and in here, I'm going to say max width of 750 pixels. There we go, maybe typing. And I'm going to say margin 0 auto to keep it in the middle as the container goes bigger or smaller. I'll save that. I'll then do hello world. I'm going to cut and say div class container and single call. Drop it in, hello world. It should kick just to the right, and it'll move according to design just so it keeps a single column design in focus. From here, I want to bring in the accordion. So let's get started in that section next. After the H1, I'm going to say div class equals, and we'll say both accordion and also accordion flush. This will just take off the right, left, and top borders, as I don't need to have the accordion be wrapped totally around. I just want that bottom line to stay flush, as in accordion flush. After this, I'm going to drop the return key down and just close this div before I forget. And in this div, let me just drop down the class. We're going to run out of room on the screen right here. I'm going to say ID equals accordion example for my ID that I want to use for this project. Inside, I'm going to just, again, drop it down just a touch. I'm going to add my first accordion item. So I'll say div class equals accordion item. In the div class here, this will hold my accordion for the first item here. If I move it up just a little bit in the accordion item, I'm going to say H2. So I want to have a title for this design. Now keep in mind, if you have an H1 and then an H2, you're going to want to use an H3. Don't forget to follow the pattern, but since I only have the H1, the H2 comes next. The H2 class equals accordion header, and this ID will correspond to the first item. So ID of heading 1. Heading 1. There we go. Again, only one ID because it's only the first one, so we'll have heading 2 and heading 3 down below. After the H2, we can open and close. And in the H2, we're going to add a button. And this button will have a couple things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open and close this button. And I'll say accordion. Oh, I want to say uppercase accordion item number 1. Let's go back and let's just save this to start. We will see, there it is, accordion number 1. There's no real design to it yet because all the magic starts happening inside the button. So this button area, I'll return key down and I'll just indent for readability. Our class is going to be accordion dash button, and the type, whoa, hello, type, that's going to drive me crazy all day long if I'm not careful. Type equals button. There we go. And data BS. I always laugh at the BS. I know it stands for Bootstrap, but still it can mean for something else. BS toggle. And we'll say collapse. So when it toggles, it opens and closes. And the data BS target is going to be an ID of collapse 1. One more piece, actually 2 more pieces. Aria expanded is going to equal true, and aria controls is going to equal collapse 1. Awesome. We have this button. I know it's a lot of writing, and it's getting there. Check it out. Accordion 1 is open, but of course we don't have any content yet. So let's go ahead and add the content down below after the button and the H2. So after the H2, but before the close of the accordion item, I'm going to say div ID equals collapse 1. Make sure I caught that perfectly. Now keep in mind also I did use a capital O for 1. If you have lowercase, then just make sure it matches it side by side. And again, I'm going to run out of legibility space, so I'm going to drop it down, close my div tag. Let's do this and come on ID, you can do it. There we go. That's what I wanted to have for legibility. So we'll move the ID up. We have ID collapse 1. Then we'll add the class. So we'll say class equals accordion dash collapse space collapse show. And now we will see eventually put our text in. To keep going a little bit further, not there quite yet, we'll say aria labeled by, bingo, and we'll say heading 1. After that, we're going to say data BS parent and bring back that ID accordion example from the parent. And now what we'll do is I'm going to bring in some information. So I'll say paragraph, and I'll add some lorem ipsum, save. And now what I get is I get my text showing up. Pretty good. We got to continue along to make it really be an accordion because we don't have our second or our third accordion to make it work, but we can see it goes up and it goes down pretty successfully. But if you look at it, it's not looking perfect yet. If we scroll up and down, there's no padding on the right or left hand sides of the accordion. So we have to add the accordion body after this accordion example. So I'm going to cut this paragraph for 1 second. And inside of here, I'm going to add one more indentation. And we'll say div class equals accordion, and we'll say body. From here, what I'll do is we'll drop back in our paragraph. And now when I save it and do that, notice how we have this beautiful padding on all sides to make it just a little more legible. And again, if I move it back and forth, the 750 pixel line stays the way it should be. And it goes back and forth and it moves even to a mobile side and the text wraps around accordingly. No pun intended. We have our first accordion. Let's do it again for our second, and then we'll duplicate it for our third. So what we'll do is we'll come back down here. And this is going to be a little tricky, which is also why I put a space inside this div. I want to make sure I'm not going around or outside these open two divs. So I put a space right here just so I can see the accordion item stops and starts in that design. Just a little bit of extra readability that I like to have just so I can see where the open and close div tags show up. Now that we have accordion 1, let's add accordion number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say div class and group it as accordion item, open and close the div tag, and we'll add the H2 at the top. So we'll say H2 class accordion header. And from here, I'll add the ID. I can fit this one in. Heading 2. Yeah, we're good. Perfect. H2 opens and closes. Inside the H2, we're going to add the button. And we'll say, this one's not going to fit. Let's drop it down. Button go away. I don't know why I just hit the left arrow 35 times there. Inside the button, we'll say class equals accordion. And we'll go accordion button. They're all kind of saving now, which is pretty helpful to work with. And we'll say collapsed. That's not going to work. Collapsed. There we go. C-O-L-L-A-P-S-E-D. Perfect. Make sure I didn't spell it incorrectly. Otherwise, this would not work. So it's collapsed by default. If we go and say the type is going to be a button, there we go. And we'll say data BS toggle is going to be collapse. Data BS target is going to be an ID, collapse 2, and the aria expanded, and there we go, is going to be false with the aria controls equal to collapse 2. Perfect. We have our second button all set to go. Now we'll do is we'll say accordion item number 2. And if we save and refresh, hey, it's starting to look pretty good. Of course, we don't have any content to expand out below, so it's not really working successfully, but the 1 still works properly. After the H2, let's put in some content. So H2 down below, we'll say div ID equals collapse 2. Identify this is our second one. Whoa, come back here, Mighty Mouse. And we'll say class, I'm going to run a room there again. Let's just drop the div and drop the ID. And just so we have legibility, perfect. ID, and then this one's going to be class. And we'll say accordion, collapse, and collapse, because it's going to be shut. After this, what I'm going to do is I'll say aria labeled by equals heading 2, and we'll say data BS parent equals to ## accordion example, making sure I did spell it right from the top part as well. Now when I save it, it's still not going to do anything yet, but it does move up and down because we do have some sort of collapsible area in which to work with. Awesome. Let's add that accordion body and add some content in here. So what I'll do here, indent it inside, div class equals accordion body, open and close the body, and we'll add a paragraph, and Mr. Lorem Ipsum shows up. And now we have a working feature. Oh, this is looking really good now. Accordion item 1 is open by default. Accordion item 2 opens up, and accordion item 1 closes down. Looking pretty good. Let's do one more for number 3, and then we'll stylize this to make it look that much better. So let's scroll down the page right down here. And again, I'm going to add that extra bit of space just because I can then see where the stops and start happen between the accordions from 1, 2, and 3. So here we go again. One more time. Div class equals accordion item. It's not going to look at that list. There we go. And we'll open and close the accordion item. And we'll add the H2. I'm going to drop it up and down for right now. And our H2 is going to contain the class of accordion header. And our ID is going to be, you guessed it, heading 3, our third header in this group. From here, I'll say button class equals, and we'll say accordion button and collapsed, making sure I did spell it properly. I didn't think I caught the S before. And we're going to run a room in classic Hayden coding on this project. Thought we're going to have the space, but apparently we're not. So we'll just drop it down for maximum legibility. And the button class, the type is going to be a button. Our data, BS, no laughing at the BS, toggle equals collapse. And we'll do data, BS target. And this one's going to be a third one. So we'll do collapse 3. Perfect. Aria expanded will be false. It's not going to be open by default. And aria controls will then be collapse 3. Perfect. A lot of writing for just a button. I'm totally aware of that. Let's move this up a little bit higher on our screen. So we now have accordion item number 3. And when I save, check it out, 3 is there, but of course we have no content yet, so we have to add that in down below. I don't need the extra space on that H2. So we'll say div class collapse 3 for this one. And classic Hayden again, I'm just going to run out of room, so we'll drop this down and bring it back to the way it is. Perfect. So we have collapse 3. We have our class equal to accordion collapse and collapse. How many times can I say collapse in one sentence? We'll then do aria labeled by equals heading 3. After that, data BS parent will then be accordion example. Looking great, everybody. And now what we'll do is inside of this, we'll say our div class equals accordion body and drop our paragraph in and say lorem. Now what we should have is 3 sets to go. Oh, did I miss something? Let me take a look and see what one piece I think I missed. And I believe I caught it. So don't forget the collapse 3 is an ID, and I wrote a class right here. So of course I have class and class. If you were following along, you probably would have said something and raised your hand. This was an actual class, no pun intended. Let's flip the div ID to collapse 3, and now it looks so much better. Now when I open and close 2 and 3, it's looking that much stronger. So we have the accordion working really good, but I want to make this look so much stronger. So now let's head into the CSS to stylize it, to give it some more character, to make this really come alive. All right, so let's head over to our CSS. Let's get out of the HTML for a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to first focus on biggest to smallest, and the H2 really came first when it came to this accordion item. So the button overrode the H2. I want to get it back to its default size of an H2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say class accordion button, and I'm going to say font size, and we're going to bring it back to its inherent state. So when I save this, what's going to happen is now they get bigger like default H2s. I don't like to go so much smaller that those buttons were hard to read. So for me, I like bringing it back. You can change your button design if you want to, and then you can focus on the H2 by nullifying this accordion button class. After that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say accordion item, and in here, I'm going to give it a different border color. So I'm going to say border 1px, because right now that gray is good, but I want to give it just a different tone to it. So I'll say solid, and the RGBA, I'm just going to soften it a little bit. So if I were to have a different color background, it will blend into my design. I'm going to say 35, 65, 100, and then 0.15. That'll just soften my lineup just a tad. And it's kind of hard to see on the screen here, but this line does go to a lighter blue just a little bit as it's dark, and then it goes to 15%. So it still shows up, but just gives it a different color for this border. After this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say accordion, an accordion button, and we'll say not collapsed. What this is going to do is it's going to give a different color when it's not collapsed. The color is going to stay inherent. It's going to go back to its parent, but I'm going to say background, and in this design, RGB is going to be 35, 65, and 100. Let me space out that number there. And I'll add a color of gray to this design. So we'll say E8, E8, and E8. When they're all the same, this is for red, this is for green, and this is for blue. When I save it, now what I get, ooh, that looks pretty sharp, is this kind of rich, almost blue-green color. And and I reversed out the title of accordion item 1. Awesome, looking pretty good. But there's one problem to be had. Our little arrow right here is still blue. Well, here's a problem. The arrow is by default blue, and if it didn't have a color, I could apply it as it's an SVG. But I have to get a little creative in this way. So what I'm going to do is, if I come back down here, I'm going to write something kind of unique. I'm going to say accordion button, not collapsed. And on top of that, I'm going to add the after because that's where the icon shows up. I'm going to use a filter to change the color and filter it to a different style. So what I'm going to do is in the filter, so kind of a cool, unique CSS property. I'm going to say brightness. I'm going to say 0% because the brightness taken all the way down to 0 is going to be black. So if I save this, check out what happens. Notice it turns black. Well, in the filtering, because right now that black is really hard to see, as you can see on the screen, what I can also do is I can invert the color. Because I have black, if I say invert, not inherit, invert, if I say 100%, well, the opposite of black is white. Now, to me, that was too bright because this is not a pure white. If I were to add a color white above, I would add the invert to 100%. But this is really about a 70% gray, so I'm going to change the invert to 70%. And now what happens is that gray goes to that arrow from pure white. It's just a subtle change, but to me, it really helped in terms of the design. Also, the focus is around. So by default, there's this light blue area around each box. That drives me crazy. So what I want to do is I'm going to say accordion, button, and focus. I'm going to take out the focus by saying box shadow. And my favorite word, inherit. It goes to its parent, which is essentially none. When I save and refresh, no more focus on the accordion. It's fine if you want to keep it there, but it kind of drives me crazy because I already see the effects of it happening once I click on it. Now here's one little thing I also did for my design that I might want to adjust the sizes of these to be a little smaller than by default. So if you want to make them smaller, but also notice how they resize accordingly to the size of the width, if we apply the same kind of style that Bootstrap has, this is an optional piece. I'm going to say media, and I'll say max width 767, because I'll start changing at a certain size. PX, we'll drop in our media query, and we can say accordion button H2. And from here, I can say something like font size. And in the font size, they use a calc. And the calc, I set it to 0.95 rem plus 1.5 vertical width. When I do it this way, it just adjusts the sizes just a little bit. So it'll adjust as it gets smaller and bigger if that's what you want to do. Again, this is an optional media query that you can use to adjust your sizes based upon a specific size, or just take it out. If I comment it out, save, refresh, and now my design goes backwards and forwards to paste upon my design that I want to use inside of my accordion. If you want more help in Bootstrap, I have a ton of videos right here to help you. And always, you're welcome to subscribe if you found this information fully useful. As always, I'm Hayden Adams with A Designer Who Codes.